A white officer steps in front of a black judge on the steps of the courthouse. And within minutes, everything spirals into a moment that will shake an entire city. No one expected it. Not today. Not her. Judge Riley Carter had handled difficult cases before, but nothing prepared her for what waited outside the courthouse that morning. Her alarm had failed. Traffic had been brutal. And the biggest trial of her career was minutes away. The wrong kind of minutes. The kind that turn into headlines. She pulled into the parking area behind the Lafayette Parish Courthouse, gripping the steering wheel as she glanced at the dashboard clock. 10 minutes until opening statements. Her chest tightened. She had spent months preparing for this trial. Every file, every testimony, every angle, all of it pointed toward one thing. This was not a normal case. It was a turning point. Today, the courtroom would hear the story of Marcus Hale, a young black man arrested while standing in front of his own apartment building. He had been waiting for a ride to his night shift. No crime, no disturbance. Nothing but the suspicion in one officer's eyes. Riley had read every detail. She had felt the weight of the injustice with every page, and now she was walking straight into a storm. She stepped out of her car and fixed her robe over her arm. Inhaling deeply in an attempt to steady herself, her life in the legal world had not been simple. She had climbed every rung of the ladder while carrying the quiet knowledge that she was judged before she ever opened her mouth. But today felt different, sharper. Personal, she chose the side entrance to avoid reporters crowding the main steps. Their voices drifted faintly from the front of the building, calling out questions she didn't have time to answer. The media had already turned the case into a symbol. People across the state were watching. Some with hope, others with resistance. And Riley was expected to remain calm through all of it as she approached the side door. She noticed a young white officer standing guard. His posture was stiff. His eyes tracked her from the moment she left the parking lot. Riley recognized the look before he even opened his mouth. It was a look she had encountered more times than she cared to remember. The look that saw her skin before anything else. She lifted her ID badge, ready to show it, as she always did. But before she could speak, he stepped directly in front of her path and raised a hand. "Ma'am?" "I need to see identification," he said, his tone sharp and cold. Riley stopped. A small, controlled pause. She held her badge higher. "I'm Judge Carter," she said. "I need to get inside. I'm presiding over the Hale case." Her voice was calm, professional, the kind of voice she had mastered over the years. The young officer didn't even lean forward to read the badge. He looked her up and down instead. Slow, assessing, dismissing. "There was a disturbance nearby," he said. "You match the description of someone involved. I need you to answer a few questions." The words hit her harder than she expected. A familiar wave rose in her chest. She tightened her jaw to keep it steady. She didn't want to give him any reaction he was waiting for. "Officer," she said, keeping her tone even, "the trial starts in less than 10 minutes. Please look at my badge." But he didn't move. If anything, he stepped closer. His hand hovered near his belt, close to his handcuffs. "I don't care who you say you are," he snapped. "I need you to come with me." A surge of heat pushed through Riley's body. Rage, fear, disbelief. She had carried these emotions 1,000 times before, but never here. Never when she was about to deliver justice on the very issue unfolding in front of her, before she could respond. Another voice cut through the air. "What seems to be the problem here?" Riley turned. An older black officer approached, his expression tightening as he recognized her. "Judge Carter," he said quickly, stepping in front of the younger officer. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were coming through this entrance." The young officer frowned. "She matches the description that is the judge," the older officer said, his tone firm and final. "Step back. Right now." The younger man's jaw tightened, embarrassment flashing across his face. He muttered something under his breath, but finally moved out of her way. Riley inhaled slowly. She forced herself to keep her composure. Losing it would only validate what he assumed about her. The older officer leaned closer. "Are you all right, Judge?" "I'm fine," she said. But her heartbeat hadn't slowed. "Thank you." She walked past them and into the building. But as the door closed behind her, the images clung to her mind like cold shadows. His suspicious stare, his hand on his belt, his disbelief that she could be who she said she was, and the bitter truth that none of it surprised her. Inside the courthouse, the quiet halls wrapped around her like a reminder of the life she had built. She had power here, respect, authority, but even those walls could not erase what she had just experienced. As she entered the courtroom, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her shoulders. She took her seat, lifted the gavel, and brought the room to order, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the officer outside. The look in his eyes, the certainty that she was a suspect before she was a judge, and she knew the trial ahead wasn't only about Marcus Hale anymore. It was about every moment like this, every assumption, every wound that never healed. When Marcus took the stand, the tension in the room thickened. His hands trembled slightly as he described the night of his arrest. He had simply been waiting beneath a streetlight, scrolling through his phone. The officer who detained him never asked for ID, never explained why, never gave him a chance to speak. He said, "I didn't look like I belonged there," Marcus said quietly. Riley's stomach tightened. That sentence carried the weight of centuries. She had heard it before. She had lived it. She had just heard a version of it outside the courthouse door minutes earlier. Halfway through his testimony, the courtroom doors opened. Riley looked up. The young officer from outside walked in, the same one who had tried to detain her. Her pulse quickened. The prosecutor rose. "We call Officer Brent Miller to the stand." Riley's eyes locked on him. Every detail of his face, every shift of his posture, she saw the same arrogance battling with a new discomfort. And she knew the real test of this trial had just begun. The moment Officer Brent Miller took the stand, the air in the courtroom seemed to shift. He sat down stiffly, shoulders tense, eyes flicking around the room as if he wished he were anywhere else. Riley watched him closely, not with anger, but with a sharpened awareness she had learned to carry with her throughout her life. She knew his type. She knew this moment was testing him in ways he didn't understand. The prosecutor stepped forward and began calmly. But every question he asked chipped away at the shield Brent tried to hold up. "What exactly made you stop Marcus Hale that night?" Brent hesitated. A long second passed. 2, his throat bobbed. He looked out of place. Brent finally said, barely meeting the prosecutor's eyes. There it was. The phrase that had haunted generations. The phrase that wasn't a description at all, but a judgment. Riley felt a slow ache rise in her chest. She kept her face still, but inside she felt something twist. That same judgment had been aimed at her just minutes before she entered. This room the prosecutor didn't let up. Out of place how? What did he do that made you believe he was committing a crime? Brent shifted in his seat. His uniform seemed too tight now, too heavy. He was standing around. He kept looking around. It seemed suspicious. Riley studied him. She had read the case files. Marcus had been waiting for a ride. That was all. Nothing about his behavior had been suspicious. Nothing at all? So you arrested him for standing? The prosecutor asked. The room went still. Brent's jaw tightened. His voice dropped. I arrested him because the situation felt wrong, or because you assumed he didn't belong, the prosecutor said. Brent's eyes flickered. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said more than any denial could. Witness after witness continued through the day. Marcus's neighbors. People who had seen the arrest. Officers who had reviewed the footage. Every new voice added weight to the truth already filling the room. Marcus had been arrested for nothing but being a black man in his own neighborhood. But through it all, Riley felt Brent's gaze land on her again and again. She could see realization dawning in his face. He recognized her now. He knew exactly who she was. And he knew exactly what he had done earlier outside the courthouse. When the court recessed for lunch, Riley remained in her chair for a moment, letting the silence wrap around her. She had kept her composure all morning, But the confrontation outside lingered at the edges of her mind. The sting of it, the familiarity of it, the way it mirrored everything in this case. She took a long breath and looked around the empty courtroom. She knew she couldn't afford to let her emotions rule her judgment. She had sworn to be fair, to be exact, to be steady, even when the world didn't offer her the same grace. When the trial resumed, the defense tried to frame Brent Miller as a young officer, overwhelmed, inexperienced, and well-intentioned. But the jury didn't seem convinced. They watched him with narrowed eyes and tight expressions, not with cruelty, but with recognition. They had seen enough of these stories to know when a truth was being dressed up as something else. By the end of the day, the tension in the room was thick and alive. Everyone felt it. Everyone carried it. Riley dismissed the courtroom, but she did not leave her seat. She knew someone was approaching even before she lifted her eyes. Sergeant Daniel Rhodes. The older black officer from that morning stepped inside. His expression was a mix of concern and apology. "Judge Carter," he said softly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" Riley nodded. Rhodes approached slowly, his eyes heavy with understanding. "I wanted to check on you after what happened earlier. Brent shouldn't have spoken to you like that." He was out of line. Riley let out a slow breath. She wasn't angry at Rhodes. She never had been, but she couldn't soften what she felt. "It happens more than you think," she said. "Probably more than you see." Rhodes lowered his head. "I know, and I'm trying to change things where I can. But it's a long road. Some of them don't even realize what they're carrying around inside them." "Blind spots," Riley said. The words tasted bitter. "Blind spots," Rhodes repeated quietly. "Biases that go back farther than any training manual. We're working on it, but it's slow." Riley looked at him, really looked at him. She could see the weariness in his eyes. But she also saw something else. Resolve. A kind of determination she recognized, because she carried it herself. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. "Sit here every day, listen to stories like Marcus's, and pretend it doesn't hit me the same way it hits him." "You don't pretend," Rhodes said. "You do exactly what you're doing. You hold people accountable. You keep the line straight. You be the example the rest of us need." Riley didn't respond at first, but his words settled in her chest like a heavy truth. She didn't ask for this role, but life had given it to her anyway. When Rhodes left the room, she sat alone for a long moment. The courthouse felt larger than it had before. The walls seemed to echo with every voice she'd heard that day. Every story, every injustice. She gathered her files and walked to her chambers, but the weight didn't leave her. It followed her all night. And when morning came, the courthouse was buzzing louder than ever. Reporters filled the sidewalks. Protesters held signs. People whispered about justice, accountability, change. The jury was ready. Riley stood in her chambers, staring at the files she had reviewed over and over. This case had grown beyond Marcus Hale. It had become a symbol, mirror. A call that people had been waiting to hear answered. She finally stepped out into the hallway. Her heels echoed against the floor, each step steady but heavy. As she entered the courtroom, every head turned, eyes full of hope, fear, anger, and exhaustion. Riley took her seat at the bench. Jury entered with solemn faces. The foreperson held a slip of paper that trembled slightly in her. Hand. Riley met her eyes. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The room held its breath, and when the foreperson nodded, everyone braced for the moment that would define everything that came next. The foreperson rose slowly, the piece of paper trembling slightly between her fingers. Every inch of the room tightened, as if the air itself knew what was coming. Riley steadied herself. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. But she kept her face calm, steady, unreadable. "In the case of Officer Brent Miller," the foreperson said, her voice wavering for a second before gaining strength, "we, the jury, find the defendant guilty of wrongful arrest and racial discrimination." A ripple shot through the courtroom. A low murmur rose from the gallery. Some gasped. Some closed their eyes in relief. Others sat frozen, as if trying to process the reality of the words. Marcus Hale sat still for a moment, stunned. When it finally sank in, his shoulders dropped, and he let out a shaky breath he had been holding for months. Riley watched him carefully. The pain he carried in his eyes didn't disappear with the verdict, but a small spark of something lighter flickered there. Something that had been missing for too long. She shifted her gaze toward Brent Miller. He stared forward, pale and hollow, completely stripped of the confidence he had shown the day he arrested Marcus. His hands clenched and unclenched on the table before him. It wasn't anger in his face now. It was realization. It was the crushing truth that he couldn't hide behind vague explanations anymore. Riley brought her gavel down with a sharp strike. Court is adjourned. People began to rise, voices rising with them. Reporters rushed toward the doors. Families embraced. Officers moved around the room, some tense, some relieved. But before Riley could leave the bench, Brent suddenly stood up. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cracking. The room went still again. All eyes snapped back toward him. Riley paused, her hands still resting near the gavel. Brent looked smaller than he had at any point during the trial, his stare unsteady, his breath uneven. "I need to say something," he whispered. Riley gave a slight nod. Allowing him the space, Brent lifted his head, eyes finding hers. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting people. But I see now how wrong I was." His voice trembled. "I let my assumptions guide me. I let fear make decisions for me. And I hurt someone who didn't deserve any of it." He swallowed hard. His next words came out fragile. "I'm sorry." The silence that followed felt almost heavy enough to bend the walls. Everyone watched Riley, waiting, wondering what she would say. She felt the weight of history sitting on her shoulders. She thought of every time she had been dismissed, every time she had been doubted, every time someone had looked at her skin before they looked at her credentials. She heard his apology. She understood it. But she also understood everything it could not erase. "Your apology is noted, Officer Miller," Riley said softly but firmly. "But the harm caused by actions like yours goes far beyond a single moment. It affects lives, families, futures. You cannot undo what happened. You can only learn from it." Brent nodded, tears threatening at the edges of his eyes. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply stood there, absorbing the truth he could no longer run from. He was escorted out quietly, the room still watching him with a mix of sadness, anger, and resignation. Riley sat for a long moment after he left, letting her pulse settle as the courtroom gradually emptied. Marcus approached her with his attorney. His face was tired but hopeful. "Thank you, Judge Carter," Marcus said gently, "for listening, for giving me a chance." Riley met his gaze. "You deserved to be heard," she said. "You deserved justice." "It feels like a start," Marcus said, his voice quiet but sincere. "It is a start," Riley agreed. "But there is still so much more work to do." He nodded, understanding. Then he walked away, disappearing into a crowd of supporters waiting for him in the hallway. When Riley finally gathered her files and stepped toward the side exit again, hoping to avoid the cameras, she froze. Someone was waiting near the building wall, leaning against the bricks, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. It was Brent Miller. The sight of him tightened something inside her. She stopped a few steps away. He looked up slowly, startled that she had chosen the same exit a second time. "Judge Carter," said softly. He pushed off the wall, standing straight. His face looked thinner than the day before, as if the verdict had carved pieces away from him. "I didn't expect to see you here," he admitted. She didn't say anything. She waited. She let him speak first. "I've been replaying everything," Brent said. "Not just the arrest. Not just the trial. But this morning, when I stopped you outside," his voice dropped, heavy with shame, "I didn't recognize you. I didn't even try to. I saw you and assumed something that wasn't true. Something that's been drilled into my head without me knowing it." Riley kept her expression steady, but inside, the words hit harder than she expected. She could feel the memory of that morning still prickling like a bruise beneath the surface. I know saying sorry won't fix it. And I know you've heard that before. But I'm not trying to excuse anything. I'm trying to understand how I became someone who did this. I didn't question anything until it was too late. Riley crossed her arms, searching his face. So what changed? The verdict? Or the fact that you were forced to face the consequences? He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply. When he looked at her again, there was something raw in his eyes. Something she hadn't seen before. You stopped me this morning, he said. You weren't scared. You weren't rude. You just expected to be treated like everyone else. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't look past what I wanted to see. That's what changed. I saw myself the way you saw me, and it shook me. Riley felt a long breath leave her chest. Part of her wanted to walk away. Part of her wanted to accept that something inside him had cracked open. But most of her simply felt tired. Tired of carrying the lessons other people should have learned long before they crossed her path, before she could respond. Footsteps echoed from inside the courthouse. Sergeant Rhodes stepped out into the hallway. He paused when he saw them together, his expression flickering with a mix of curiosity and concern. Brent stepped back, giving Riley space. I'll leave you alone, he said quietly. But thank you for holding me accountable. I needed it more than I knew. He walked away slowly, heading toward the parking lot with his head bowed. Rhodes approached her. You all right? He asked gently. Riley let her shoulders drop just slightly. I don't know, she said. You did what needed to be done, Rhodes replied. People like Marcus need judges like you. And honestly, officers like him need judges like you too. Riley didn't answer right away. She listened to the distant murmur of reporters outside. She could feel the world shifting on its axis in small ways. Imperfect ways, but ways that mattered. Sanctioning one officer wouldn't fix the past. But it was a crack in a wall that had stood too long. And she wasn't done yet. Riley walked back inside the courthouse, her steps slow and heavy. The echo of them followed her down the hallway, mixing with the distant noise of reporters outside. She had delivered the verdict. She had handled the confrontation with Brent, but none of it felt final. None of it felt like closure. It felt like standing at the edge of something bigger, something that refused to end just because a gavel struck wood before she could make it to her chambers. A voice called her name, Judge Carter. She turned to find Sergeant Rhodes a few feet behind her. His expression held a seriousness she had seen before in officers who had lived long enough to understand the world beyond the badge. You did the right thing today, he said, even when it wasn't easy. Riley studied him. Does any of this ever get easier? Not for people like you, Rhodes replied. Or people like me. But we don't get to quit, do we? Riley didn't answer. She already knew the truth he wasn't saying. People like them were expected to fight the battles others pretended were invisible. They carried burdens that didn't fit neatly inside a courtroom transcript. She finally continued to her chambers, closing the door behind herself. The quiet felt too big, too sharp. She sat down at her desk, staring at the files spread across it. The room felt colder. Or maybe she did. The verdict would hit the news within minutes. It would stir hope in some places, anger in others. She knew protests would follow. Heated debates. Social media storms. She knew Brent Miller's life would never be the same. She knew Marcus Hale's life might finally begin to heal. But she also knew the system around them hadn't changed overnight. The weight settled deeper into her chest. A knock broke the silence. Her clerk poked her head in. Judge Marcus Hale is asking if he could speak with you. Just for a minute, if you're willing. Riley hesitated only a moment before nodding. Send him in. Marcus entered quietly, his lawyer trailing behind him. He looked different now. Not lighter, not free, but grounded. Like someone who had finally been told the truth mattered. He stood in front of her desk, shifting his weight nervously. I won't take long, he said. I just needed to say thank you again. You already did, Riley replied, softening her voice. I know, Marcus said. But I didn't get to say what I needed to. Riley waited. When they arrested me, Marcus said, I thought my life was over. I thought nobody would believe me. I thought the world would see me the way that officer saw me. He paused, swallowing hard. But you gave me a chance. You let me be heard. You let me be seen. His voice cracked slightly. I've never had that before. Riley felt something hit her chest again, this time not sharp, but deep. You deserved justice, she said. You deserved the truth to be recognized. Marcus nodded. Maybe now something changes, maybe, she said. But change is slow, and it takes more than one verdict. I know, Marcus replied. But today felt like a step. He gave her a small, grateful smile before leaving her chambers. When the door closed behind him, Riley exhaled slowly. She wasn't sure if she felt lighter or heavier. After a moment, she stood and gathered her things. She needed air. She needed space. She headed toward the side exit again, away from the crowd of cameras waiting at the front entrance. But the moment she pushed open the door, she froze. Brent Miller wasn't there anymore. Instead, Rhodes stood alone outside, his arms crossed as if he'd been waiting for her. He nodded once. I figured you might come this way. Riley stepped beside him. Both of them facing the parking area where officers came and went between patrols. You know, Rhodes said quietly, I've been in this job a long time. I've trained hundreds of officers, and I've seen some who change for the better. But I've also seen ones who never do. Riley listened, not interrupting. What Brent did today. It doesn't wipe the slate clean, Rhodes continued. But I saw something in him when the verdict was read. That boy's been shaken in a way he never expected. Not because he got caught, but because his own reflection caught him. Riley folded her arms. You think he'll actually change? I think he'll try, Rhodes said. And sometimes trying is where change starts. She thought about that. About the weight of the work ahead. About the countless people whose stories didn't get a verdict like Marcus's. About the mornings where she had to stand strong, even when her patience was cracked. I hope you're right, she said. Rhodes lowered his voice. You gave this city something it needed. Not a perfect ending, but a spark. People pay attention to moments like this. They pay attention when someone stands up for the truth. Riley didn't feel heroic. She didn't feel strong. She felt tired. But somewhere underneath the exhaustion, a small ember burned. Thank you. Sergeant, she said quietly. He nodded and walked away. Leaving her alone in the doorway, the courthouse buzzed loudly on the other side of the building. Reporters were shouting questions. Protesters were chanting. The world was moving fast. Pulling this case into a larger conversation, Riley stepped outside and walked toward her car with a slow, steady pace. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the lot. She felt them stretching beside her like pieces of every moment that had led to this day. She unlocked her car, but didn't get in right away. She looked back at the courthouse. For years, she had believed that justice could be shaped from inside those walls. Now she understood something deeper. Justice wasn't a finished structure. It was a fight. A constant one. One she wasn't done with. One she couldn't walk away from, even if she wanted to. Riley got into her car but didn't start the engine. Her hands rested on the steering wheel as her thoughts tangled together. The trial was over. The verdict was public. Officers across the city were whispering about it. Community members were celebrating it. Some were angry at it. Some were terrified of what it meant for the future. But Riley felt none of those reactions settle in her chest. What she felt was something quieter, heavier, a sense that the ground beneath her had shifted in a way she couldn't fully explain. Her phone buzzed beside her. She picked it up. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. Thank you. Not for the verdict. For forcing me to see myself. She knew who it was without reading the name. Brent Miller. She stared at the message for a long moment before locking her phone and placing it face down on the seat. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't satisfied either. It was something in between. Something complicated. She finally started the car and drove home. The news was everywhere on the radio, each host speaking about the verdict with a different mix of shock, praise, or outrage. When she pulled into her driveway, she turned the radio off, unable to listen anymore. Inside her home, she set her bag down and moved through the familiar rooms. The weight of the day followed her like a shadow. She changed out of her robe, placed it neatly in its usual spot, and washed her face. But the exhaustion didn't leave. Hours passed before she finally fell asleep. But morning came too quickly. She woke to the sound of her phone ringing nonstop. Messages from colleagues, community members, old law school friends. A few calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She didn't answer any of them. She needed time, space, breath. When she finally stepped outside to check her mailbox, a car was parked across the street. Rhodes stepped out. Riley wasn't surprised to see him. He walked toward her slowly, hands tucked into his jacket, his face carrying the weight of whatever news he was bringing. "I didn't expect visitors this early," Riley said. Rhodes exhaled hard. "I wish I weren't here." Her stomach tightened. "What happened?" "It's Brent." Riley stiffened, bracing herself. "He turned himself in early this morning," Rhodes said. "He walked into the precinct before sunrise. Said he needed to start taking responsibility right away. No delays. No special treatment." Riley didn't speak right away. She felt something shift inside her. Something unexpected. "He also wanted you to know something," Rhodes added. "He said the verdict wasn't the moment that changed him. It was seeing you stand in that courtroom and stay steady even after he profiled you. He said it made him realize how deep his own beliefs ran." Riley let out a slow breath. "People don't change overnight," no, Rhodes said. "But they do start somewhere." He stepped closer. "There's more," he said. "2 other officers have come forward since last night. They're admitting to questionable stops they made in the past. I don't think they would have spoken up if they hadn't seen what happened in court." Riley's eyes widened. Rhodes nodded. This wasn't just a verdict. It started something. Something real. A long silence pulled between them. Not heavy. Not painful. Just significant. Riley leaned against her mailbox, letting the cool morning air settle her thoughts. "So what now?" she asked quietly. Rhodes looked back toward his car. "Now we keep going. The work doesn't end because one case closed. But you gave people a reason to think things can change. Some will resist it. Some will fight it. But some will rise to meet it." Riley closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the truth settle inside her. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel victorious. But she felt ready. Ready in a way she hadn't expected. "You should head in soon," Rhodes said. "The courthouse is filling up already." "What for?" she asked. Rhodes paused. "People want to see you. Reporters, community leaders, even officers. They want to hear what you have to say." Riley felt her pulse quicken. "I didn't prepare a statement." "You don't need one," Rhodes said. "You just need to show up. You've been doing that your entire life." She looked down at her hands. Strong hands. Steady hands. Hands that had signed verdicts, been lifted an oath, carried the weight of every hard decision she ever made. She finally nodded. "I'll come," she said. Rhodes gave her a small, proud smile. "I'll drive." They rode in silence back to the courthouse. As they approached, Riley saw the crowd gathered outside. Not chaotic. Not angry. Just present, watching, waiting. The kind of crowd that formed when people felt something big had shifted and wanted to witness whatever came next. Rhodes opened her door for her. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she admitted, "but I'm going anyway." They walked toward the entrance together. As soon as she stepped forward, a hush fell over the crowd. Reporters lifted microphones. Officers straightened. Citizens leaned forward with expectant eyes. Riley didn't prepare a speech. She didn't plan what to say. She simply let her truth rise. "I didn't come here to celebrate a verdict," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I came here because justice is not one case. It's not one trial. Justice is something we build every day. Decision by decision, moment by moment." The crowd leaned closer. What happened in that courtroom wasn't about punishing one officer. It was about all of us deciding whether we want fairness to be real or just a word we say. She paused, letting the silence speak for her. I can't promise that everything will change today, but I can promise that I will keep showing up. And I hope you do too, because justice is only possible when we refuse to stop fighting for it. Someone in the crowd started clapping, then another, and another. Soon the entire gathering was applauding, not out of celebration, but out of recognition. Riley stood strong, the morning sun warming her face as the sound washed over her. She had not expected this moment, but she embraced it, because she understood something now. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a fight. One she was ready to continue, one she would not walk away from. And as the applause rose around her, she knew with absolute certainty that the story was far from over. It was only beginning.